favorite reads um, through this. So, but I did want to say next week. Sean, do you remember what we're doing next week on Writer's Lunch? I don't recall.
Problematic tropes with Ian.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. So yeah, next week Ian's gonna come give us a presentation about problematic tropes. So come back for that if you're interested. But for now, let's get into this. Let's see. Well, if I
And
can. Oh,
Juneteenth started because we're in Houston, and
yeah.
so we definitely should mention, that it started right near Houston as well. So in
Yes.
Galveston, where the first time the Emancipation Proclamation was read in the South.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Sean. So a little bit about me. I think everyone here has been to Writer's Lunch before, so you all know who I am. I'm Anna or AP Hawkins. I write science fiction and fantasy. I'm an editor at Tomeworks. I'm currently querying my first novel, but my short fiction has been published in various magazines and anthologies. And I, just a couple weeks ago, I just got back from a family trip to the UK. We had great weather, so if you're looking for, or if you're ever wanting to go on a trip to England and Scotland, I recommend going in May. It was very, very nice weather most of the time we were there. We barely had any rain, and the temperature was wonderful. So, all right, so let's get into this.
And Anna, about
Yes.
that, I bet they said, "Oh my gosh, it's so hot out here," and you were like, "This is great."
Yeah, no, in London it was like in the upper 60s to mid 70s, so it was really nice. And then in Edinburgh and then up in northern Scotland, it actually was kind of cold. It was in like the 50s. So yeah, but it was really I really enjoyed it. It was nice. So but anyway, so let's get into our list of authors that we are celebrating today. I do want to point out before I get into this list, this is not a comprehensive list of Black authors by any means. If we were to do that, we would be here for several days, and we only have an hour. So this is not a comprehensive list because I made the list mostly by myself. It's mostly science fiction and fantasy authors. There are a few exceptions, and I did have some submissions from the other Tomeworks editors as well. But I do want to point out that you are going to see mostly science fiction and fantasy authors on this list, but there are a few others who are not in that genre. So let's get into it. So first up, we have Zora Neale Hurston. Zora Neale Hurston is the icon. I was reading about her for this presentation. She did so many amazing things in her life. She was an author, she was an anthropologist, she was a folklorist, she made film documentaries. She did so many things, and she was a very, very prolific writer. She wrote literature, poetry, she published scientific research, she wrote plays. Um, and as far as I was able to find, she did not win any awards for her writing during her lifetime, but she has received many posthumous recognitions and awards. And there's even a literary award named after her now, so she is very famous and well known in the literary community. These are some of her books. So, like I said, she's very prolific. She wrote so many things. If you want to read Zora Neale Hurston, I mean, you have your pick. You could read her research, you could read novels, you could read her plays, you could read her poetry. I for this list, I chose to feature here four novels. These four novels she published during her lifetime. There have been a couple other novels by her that she began in her lifetime but didn't finish and have since been published. And I think one just came out recently. There was a novel about King Herod that came out recently that was written by Zora Neale Hurston. Um, and it was one that she began in her lifetime and has since been, edited and published. But I think her most famous novel is Their Eyes Were Watching God. We read this one in school, in high school. So this I'm familiar with this one. But if you're looking for Zora Neale Hurston books to read, definitely check out some of her other works as well. She was a very prolific writer in her lifetime, and still continues to be very famous to this day. Next, and I am gonna go pretty quickly through this list because I have a list of like 20 or more authors to get through in
This
an
is
hour.
just a little soundbite. It's
This
like
is a yeah, this
enticing
is a
you to,
sampler of many authors.
yes, a sampler,
Um,
yes.
mhm. So we're trying to celebrate as many authors as we can in an hour. So Octavia Butler, she is like the original Black science fiction author. She, talked about in her lifetime many times about, well, why aren't there any, Black science fiction authors, and talking about how, people have a hard time imagining what they don't know. And so, but she's from California. She started writing when she was 10 years old. And she dedicated her life to writing. She didn't have she held like temporary jobs throughout her life, but her main love and her main focus in her lifetime was writing. Um, and she, off and on throughout her life, she taught at the Clarion Workshop, and she actually befriended Samuel Delany, who's another author on this list, when she attended the Clarion Workshop earlier in her writing life. But she won many awards throughout her lifetime as an author. She won two Hugo Awards. Neither one were for Best Novel. She won for Best Short Story and I think Best Novelette. Um, but she won two Hugo Awards, two Nebula Awards. She won a Locus Award, Arthur C. Clarke. She won many awards for her writing throughout her lifetime. Um, and let's see, I have some of her books here for you guys to check out. But she is very well known. Her writing is very well known within the science fiction community.
I'm
Um,
gonna throw this out as well about
yeah,
Octavia Butler before you get to her books that she was an editor a decent amount, and in terms of honing your writing, it is great to learn by editing other people's stuff,
yeah,
as well as I she I has a lot of very inspirational quotes regarding kind of like butting your head up against a wall in
mhm,
terms of writing and really like persevering through the tough parts.
yeah,
So there's a lot of great quotes out there from Octavia Butler. You can find a lot of them on the internet.
yeah.
If you're needing a little pick me up, if you're feeling like your writing journey is running into a brick wall, Octavia Butler, it can be a great source of inspiration.
Yeah, she did struggle a lot with like writer's block and mental health like depression types of issues that kind of didn't prevent her from writing obviously, but made it more difficult to write. The myth of the depressed creator is one of the most pervasive myths, but for most people um, it's much easier to actually create when you are in a calm and happy mental health space. And so, yeah, she did struggle a lot with writer's block throughout her life. So, yeah, she definitely, has a lot to say on that I relate to because I also struggle with that as well. But these are some of her books. You may have heard of some of them, but she obviously this is only four. She was also a very prolific author during her life, and she wrote many, many science fiction books. Wild Seed and Dawn are both the first books in two different series that she wrote. They are both fantastic. And very heartfelt books. So definitely check these out if you're looking to start a new sci-fi series. Parable of the Sower, I think she had written this one and had planned a series or planned a sequel or started on it, but never finished it in her lifetime. And then Kindred is a standalone novel of hers that
Let me
she
throw
wrote.
this out there. So,
Yeah.
Parable of the Sower,
Mhm.
has Parable of the Talents as the
Mhm.
second book.
Oh,
She
okay,
did
she
mean
did
it to
finish
be
the
a
second one.
trilogy,
Mm.
and there are notes out there. People have
Yeah.
considered like finishing it for her, kind of in what would it be? Like a Dune way, where the
Mhm.
Frank Herbert's son started doing it, and it went on based on his dad's notes.
Yeah.
But it hasn't been done yet.
Yeah.
And the first two are very earthbound, but
Hmm.
apparently, what the third one was supposed to be was absolutely space opera style.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. Wild Seed is also Earthbound. And I haven't gone back for the second book in the series, so I don't know if they go into space. But it is sci-fi. It's just a very, it's an Earthbound sci-fi. But then the Dawn, the Xenogenesis series is very much space opera-ish. Um, but yeah, definitely check out her books if you're looking for good science fiction reads. So next I have Samuel Delaney, who I think Sean actually added him to my list. But he was a contemporary of Octavia Butler. And I actually, fun fact about Samuel Delaney, which I didn't know until I was reading about him, his name is the most misspelled name in science fiction. It has been misspelled over 60 times in like book reviews and interviews and things like that. People put an extra E in his last name. And so it's very often misspelled. Um, but he has also won many awards for his work, and he wrote in many different genres. He writes science fiction, literature. I believe he's written some plays, and a lot of other different different things. He has not like confined himself to just the science fiction genre.
So
So
I'm going to throw this out there as well
yeah,
regarding Samuel Delaney. Especially since he's my addition to this list for sure.
yeah.
I would put him as a contemporary of Isaac Asimov and Heinlein, and
Mhm.
he really came up at the same time as them. Octavia Butler is about 20 years younger or
Yeah,
so.
that's true.
Now meeting Samuel Delaney and working with him, very good,
Mhm.
absolutely. But Samuel Delaney was around in the 50s and 60s, and kind of I wrote a lot of his early books with either no reference to what race his POV characters were, or very specific ones of picking very diverse things.
Mhm.
And there's an interesting essay he wrote about going to award shows at the very beginning of the Hugos, the Nebulas, and stuff like that, and seeing who clusters around. What tables people sat at and stuff. And he was absolutely there, was getting things published like everybody else, and was just like, don't think that this is, like a zero-sum game. If you open the doors for other people, that means less for you.
Mhm.
Just, like a rising tide lifts all boats. Let's all get in on this. And he could recognize that inherent racism in early sci-fi, and he was there for it and pushed through it, like trailblazer in that respect. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, is he still alive, Sean? Do you know?
He is still alive, and I
Yeah.
saw him talk last year,
Yeah.
and he is also semi-canceled for his views on let's say Greek love. Is
Mm.
that a far enough away, and yet you understand what I'm talking about, AP? His
I mean,
ideas
I
on.
I did see in his biography that he has written erotic novels as well.
Oh,
So
he is okay. So he's also written erotic novels. He has
yeah.
also written a memoir about his time in New York City in the 50s and 60s when homosexuality was absolutely illegal, and
Mhm.
having to sneak around, going to the, seedy dollar theaters, in the middle
Mhm.
of the day, stuff like that. Like it's crazy, his stuff, some of the stuff that he's written.
Yeah.
But yes, his ideas on like, oh, an old man and a young boy should be able to. He's a little verboten in some circles these days.
Yeah. Fair. I do have some of his books on here, if I can get my PowerPoint to. Um, so these are some of his science fiction novels that I have added to our list to check out. I personally have not read any of these. to my dismay. I've heard Babel 17 is really good, so I do kind of want to go read that. I am not super well versed in quote sci-fi classics written by men. The only ones I've ever gone back to read are the ones written by women. So, but Sean, have you read any of his sci-fi
Yeah.
novels or
Yeah.
okay.
So I'll throw this out there. I have Dahlgren on my shelf, haven't gotten into it. It's a lot more philosophical.
Hmm.
But once again, like writing at the same time as Heinlein and writing kind of like really dense sci-fi that's extremely metaphorical back in the day.
Hmm.
That fits in that. Babel 17 is more like a pop sci-fi novel, and
Hmm.
it is of that ilk, 50s, 60s, pew pew, shooting in space kind of things, but it's very good.
Yeah.
I and has a female protagonist. I and I his other stuff, Trouble. I'm looking at Triton right here on my shelf as well. Haven't read it, but that's another one as well that's kind of like written to market, like not as in depth as Dahlgren and some of his other books that are much thicker and metaphorical for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. All right. So next, N.K. Jemisin, my personal favorite author on this list. I love all of her books that I've read. She, before she became a full-time author, she was a counseling psychologist. In 2020, she received a MacArthur Genius Grant, which helped her transition into full-time writing. She writes science fiction and fantasy. She was actually the first Black author to win the Hugo Award for Best Novel for her novel The Fifth Season in 2016. And she won the Hugo Award for Best Novel 3 years in a row for The Fifth Season. The sequel to The Fifth Season, Obelisk Gate, and then the sequel to that, which the title of the third book in the trilogy is escaping me for some reason. But it's a trilogy. It's very good. Highly, highly, highly recommend the fifth season series, the Broken Earth trilogy. It's very good. She's also won 3 Locus Awards and a Nebula Award. She's won various other awards so far. She's still, well into her writing career, so she's still producing books. These are some of my favorites of hers. The fifth season, obviously, on this list because when I read it back in 2018, I couldn't stop talking about it. So it's a very good book. Highly, highly recommend it. It's a kind of a sci fantasy, leaning more on the fantasy side, but it's very good. Um, the City We Became is more of a modern kind of contemporary magical realism type of fantasy. Really cool POVs in this book. I really enjoyed this, and I want to go back for the sequel. I think it's out now, but I haven't gone back for it yet. Um, and The 100,000 Kingdoms is also the first book in a trilogy, another fantasy trilogy. This is more straight fantasy without really the sci-fi elements of the fifth season. And then How Long Till Black Future Month is a collection of short stories that's absolutely fantastic. So if you want to read N.K. Jemisin without reading a full novel, definitely pick up How Long Till Black Future Month. You can read some of her short stories because they're very good. Um, Let's see. All right. Cece says great artwork for covers. Yeah, I love her cover art. They're very good. Rhonda says she has a great voice. Yeah. Her style and her voice and her writing is very good. Um, Okay, next we have Dr. Nnedi Okorafor, who is another favorite on this list of mine, and I know Sean is a fan of hers too. She's Nigerian American. She grew up in Chicago. She lives in Arizona now, but in high school she was a nationally known track and tennis star. And but she was diagnosed with scoliosis. Sometime in high school when she was a teenager, and it kind of ended her athletic career, unfortunately. But she has since made a very prolific career for herself as an author. Um, I was first introduced to her in college. For one of my college classes, we read her book, Who Fears Death? And it was a very interesting book for me. I thought it was a really cool twist on, kind of fantasy science fiction genre. But she has coined a new genre word for the kind of writing that she does, which is African futurism, which is it's kind of futuristic writing centered around um, African cultures and taking place on the African continent, um, or featuring characters who are from the African continent.
I'll,
Um,
I'll I'll throw this out there
yeah,
as well, and sorry if I'm stepping on your
no,
words,
you're
but
good.
African futurism as opposed to Afrofuturism,
Yeah.
which was posited in the 70s and 80s, and not so much like Samuel Delaney or Octavia Butler, but or I'm sorry, 80s and 90s, but it contains a lot of hope. And
Hmm.
like hope punk today is not like climate fiction, like you wouldn't exactly call uh who would it be? Kim Stanley Robinson Hope Punk, because
Hmm.
he doesn't have a lot of these. It'll all work out, in the end, like really soft focus types of things. She's like, stop calling my stuff Afrofuturism. There is
Yep.
no overwhelming hope in the end of this or pan-African kind of ideas. There are very specific references to all my worldviews and reference in the same way that my let's call it mainstream. Really, what it means is white sci-fi. My has reference in European culture.
Hmm. Yeah, that's exactly right. So she has won four Hugo Awards, a Nebula Award, and various others. So she's also been highly awarded for her work. And I have some of her books here. So again, Who Fears Death is the first book of hers that I read. I think it's one of the first books that she published too, if I'm not mistaken. Um,
There's a fun story about that one. I'm sorry,
uh-huh.
I love Nnedi Okorafor. There's a fun story about that one too, where actually, when people are like, I don't want to tackle an entire novel, I bring this book up because she wrote a short story and then it got a lot of positive feedback. So she wrote a novella,
Hmm.
and then that got a lot of positive feedback. She wrote, I'm sorry, novelettes. So she made it into like 12,000 words.
Hmm.
Then she made it into a novella, so about 35,000 words. And then that just building on the story and growing it was how she ended up with the entire novel.
Yeah.
Also, hat tip Buffalo, where I grew up at, because she was a professor at University of Buffalo back in the day.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah, so this is Who Fears Death is a really good book. I recommend it. If you want to get into Nnedi Okorafor, definitely pick that up. Akata Witch and Binti, I hesitate to call them YA, but they feature younger characters, and the tone is a little bit more YA than Who Fears Death. But I don't think I would necessarily classify them as YA. But they are both the beginnings of separate series, featuring separate characters, both very good. Akata Witch, I've been meaning to go back for. I've read it. I haven't gone back for the second book in the series, but it's been on my TBR forever. Binti, I've read the whole series. It's very good, and they're very short. They're like novella length. So they're a very nice little bite-sized book to pick up. Um, but definitely recommend those. Lagoon. I listened to this on Audible. It's really good. It's about kind of a first contact situation in Lagos, Nigeria. But yeah, that was a really good book too. I enjoyed that. And it was fun listening to it on Audible because the narrator did a fantastic job with the voices of all the different characters. All right. Okay, next we have Chester Himes, who Shannon added him to our list. Unfortunately, she's not here to tell us a little bit more about him. But Chester Himes, he was born in Missouri. He lived in the 50s and 60s, 50s, 60s, 70s, time frame. I don't know. Exactly when he died. But he was actually, his early life and kind of like development, he was deeply affected by an accident that injured his brother, because his brother was not able to get proper medical treatment at the hospital because it was a white hospital and he was not allowed to be treated at that hospital. And that really affected him growing up. Um, and I believe it affected his writing life as well. He did spend some time in prison, but that's when he started writing. He wanted to better himself while he was serving time, and he started writing and publishing while he was in prison as a way to earn respect both from the other inmates and the guards, and to avoid violence. But he wrote literature and detective crime novels throughout his life, mystery novels, and so this is Shannon's bread and butter in terms of genre. But if you're looking for, a mystery novel written by a Black author, definitely check his work out. It is, pretty highly regarded in the, mystery genre. So I unfortunately I don't read a lot of mysteries, so I have not read any of these, but I have definitely am going to add at least one of them to my TBR to check him out, because he seems like a really interesting guy. Um, but yeah, if you're looking for a good mystery book, check out Chester Himes. All right, next, we have Tomi Adeyemi. She is also Nigerian American, like Nnedi Okorafor, and she also grew up in Chicago, like Nnedi Okorafor did. Right now, she's a creative writing coach and an author, obviously. In 2019, she was named to the Forbes 30 Under 30 list. She does write fantasy, and I put young adult in parentheses because her books have been classified by the publishing industry as young adult, but having read them, I I don't think they should be classified as young adult, based on just the content. Um, they're young adult in the same way that if you're familiar with Sarah J. Maas, her ACOTAR, her A Court of Thorn and Roses series, which is a romantasy that in a lot of cases is like, very explicit. Um, it was initially, when she first started publishing it, it was classified as YA. And I feel like the same thing has kind of happened to Tomi Adeyemi and her books. Um, when maybe it shouldn't be in that age category. But she's won a few awards for her work. She's still very early in her writing career. Um, Rhonda said that reminds me of Game of Thrones being in the children's section of the library. Yes, exactly. But I remember when I was looking for Tomi Adeyemi's book because I wanted to read it, the first one in her series. I was looking in the bookstore and I couldn't find it. I was looking in the fantasy section. I was like, "Where is this book?" And then I was just like kind of wandering, looking around, and I wandered over to the YA section and they had this big like, shelf display for it. And I was like, "Why is it here?" So, but yeah, that's anyway, but her books, Children of Blood and Bone. These are three books in a series. These are the only books she's published so far. Children of Anguish and Anarchy is not out yet, but it's coming out this year, so it's very, very close to coming out. Um, but um, but yeah, like I said, she's really early in her writing career. So she's still, working up her repertoire of published books. But Children of Blood and Bone is fantastic. Highly recommend it. Um, if you're looking for a good fantasy book that features African characters. Very good. Love it. Um, our next author is Peach Jelly Clark. Um, I can't remember if Sean added him to my list or if I already had him on my list and then
You
Sean.
already had him on my list, and I was jealous.
There we go.
But H-Town, got to represent.
Yeah, yeah. So he did live in Houston for a while. He grew up in Trinidad and Tobago. Um, and he spent some time living in Houston, and now he is a professor at the University of Connecticut. So I
Okay, can
couldn't
I?
tell if he still lives in Houston and just is a remote professor or
Can,
if he has moved.
I actually remember we had Becca Potos on a couple of years ago. So
Yeah.
she has some contact through her. She's an agent, has some contact through her company with PJ Jelly Clark, and lives rather close to him.
Uh-huh.
And he lives in a castle
Whoa.
in Connecticut.
That's so cool.
Not a big one, but like a little
Right.
castle.
That's so
And she was
cool.
like, I am so impressed. I love it. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. So yeah,
You know, if I
he
had
does live up there. And the
yeah.
last time that I saw him speak was there was a talk he gave in Seattle,
Hmm.
and they let online people ask him questions
Yeah.
because he's very specific about locale.
Uh-huh.
So I'm sure you'll get to his books, but one of them is
Yeah.
in Georgia, one of them is New Orleans, one of them is Egypt. And
Yeah.
so I asked him, I was like, "Hey, you gonna do a Houston? You gonna do a Houston alt history book?" And he was so tickled by the question, and he was like, "I'm gonna get to it. I'll get to it at some point."
Yeah. Yeah, that's really cool that he lives in a castle. If I had castle buying money, I would live in a castle too. That's so cool. Um, but yeah, but he's in addition to being an author, he's also a historian. So Sean kind of alluded to he writes speculative fiction novels that are set in like historical settings, that may be like some maybe alternate histories, and things like that. But yeah, those are the kinds of novels that he writes for sure. He has won several awards for his work as well, including 3 Nebula Awards and 3 Locus Awards. So he is very popular in the speculative fiction community. So these are some of his novels. The only one of these that I have read is A Master of Jinn. I read it very recently. It is the one that Sean mentioned that's set in Egypt. And it's like a murder mystery, a fantasy murder mystery that I thought was really cool. It wasn't quite what I expected when I picked it up, but I did really enjoy it. And it actually came out of a short story or like I would call it a novelette because it's kind of long. But it came out of a shorter work that he wrote that was published, and people really liked it and asked him to revisit the characters for a full length work. And so he brought the characters back. Uh, the cool detective, the cool lesbian detective. He brought her back for the full length novel. So definitely recommend that.
Oh my, let me throw this out there. Like you were earlier, like I don't really read detectives. There are so many fantasy and sci-fi novels that are detectives, you
They're
know.
masquerading.
Well, it's
Yeah.
cross genre, that's
Right.
all.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Sean, have you read any of these other books by
Oh no, I read
Sean?
all of the other three. So
Okay.
I Ring Shout, freaking incredible. And if
Mhm.
anybody liked the movie Sinners, or let me recommend as well, if you see it streaming, watch Sinners. If you want to see something that I feel like is in the same world, Ring Shout, super awesome, fits in the same kind of taking reality and making it just a little fantastic, but it still rhymes so much with reality. That's Ring Shout. It's incredible. Absolutely. God's Drums. You can tell that's one of his earlier books. It's
Mhm.
not as tight, I would say, but the world building. Anna, you love description. You love to go off on a little bit of tangents here and there
Yeah.
about like, oh, and this was here. The Black God's Drums is essentially, imagine if when Haiti gained independence and broke off from France, if they also acquired a weapon that was the equivalent of the time of like a nuclear weapon.
Hmm.
And so they could keep off all the other, European powers, and they could project power. It also surmises that I do believe that the Confederates did not lose the Civil War. And so there's all sorts of logical leaps going into it, but it's terribly interesting and very fantastic. Yes, there are zombies. Haunting of Tramway Car, 015. It's a coworker. It's a coworker of the main character from Master of Jin. And I actually there's like a moment or two where it's like, hey, what's up in the office, like between the two, like just a nod,
Hmm.
they exist in the same world 100%.
Yeah. Very cool. Yeah, I was finding these covers to add on here, and I saw the one for Black God's Drums. I saw the blurb on there that said Haitian Sky Pirates, and I was like, oh, I am in. I am 100% in. So that I immediately added to my TBR when I saw it. I'm all about a good Sky Pirates book. All right, next one, Sherry L. Smith. I've only read one of her books. She writes mostly young adult fiction. I don't read a ton of young adult, but I do read it sometimes. But she has actually had an interesting career path. She worked in stop motion animation for Mars Attacks, which was a Tim Burton movie, I believe, or show or something. And she worked for a while at Disney TV animation as well. And then after she worked for them, she went to work with a construction company at the LA airport. She worked for Bongo Comics. And now she's an MFA professor for two different creative writing programs. She's a lecturer for two different creative writing programs. So she's had some very interesting jobs in her life, and I would love to, if I ever met her, I would love to ask her about her time in stop motion animation because I just find that to be so fascinating. And the way they put those movies together. But her books, like I said, she writes mostly YA, and it's speculative YA. The only one of these that I have read is Orleans. And this is a like a post-apocalyptic novel set in New Orleans. And it's about, people figuring out how to survive in this new world, and there's a deadly virus that they have to figure out how to fight. And it was a very good book. When did I read that? That was many years ago. That was like 2016 when I read that, so almost 10 years ago now. But I still remember it. It left an impression. So I thought it was a very good book. So highly recommend picking up this book if you're looking for um, a post-apocalyptic novel. But I was reading really good things about her other books as well. Fly Girl, I think, is her most recent one. But if you're looking for, speculative YA, definitely check out some of her books because she has written some interesting YA books. Um, okay. Our next author on our list is Marlon James. And this is another one of Sean's favorites. He's another one of Sean's favorites. He was born in Jamaica, but he left Jamaica to escape anti-gay violence, and he lives in Minnesota now. And he teaches literature and creative writing at the university level. He writes literature, fantasy, kind of books that kind of toe the line, I would say. Um, and but yeah, he's won a few prizes for his work. I know Sean is a big fan of Black Leopard, Red Wolf. I read this, and I personally, it was not for me, but I can see the appeal of it. It was
But you love
interesting.
Lord of the Rings. How are you gonna say that?
I, I, I don't know. I can never really say why I love or bounce off a book.
Well,
The
let me
yeah,
interject and
yeah.
say Black Leopard, Red Wolf versus Lord of the Rings. he literally set out. He was like, "What if there was a Lord of the Rings for for African descended people?"
Hmm.
And so, in the same way that so many European myths are woven into Lord of the Rings, where you wouldn't get it unless you know the reference.
Hmm.
You might love the story, but like if you know it, it's so much deeper. Black Leopard, Red Wolf does the same
Yeah.
with so many things from African culture
Yeah.
and absolutely builds on top of that. And I would say is written more like a history, like a Greek history,
Hmm.
just like Lord of the Rings, Silmarillion, yada yada.
Hmm.
And so it doesn't have a tight plot.
Yeah.
It's a very rambling plot, but it's like we're gonna get to everybody. We're gonna touch
Mhm.
on all sorts of different things, do our world building as our character wanders,
Yeah.
just wanders around the world.
Yeah.
And if you're like, I want to inhabit the world of the author, the world that the author is creating, it's amazing in that case. Then again, still love the Lord of the Rings,
Mhm.
but yeah, I think that he succeeded in that. By the
Yeah.
way, A Brief History of Killings, read 7 pages, was like, fuck no, not for me. Uh,
I mean,
way too dense,
like
way
I
too.
said, with the Black Leopard Red Wolf, I do see the appeal. It just it I think for me the tone was a little grim. And so maybe that's what put me off of it. It was just a little bit too grim for me. But I did enjoy like the adventure aspect of it. So like I do see the appeal of it. And you're not my only friend who really likes that book. So definitely worth checking out. But I haven't read his other books. I think the Book of Night Women is like historical fiction. And A Brief History of Seven Killings might be too. But like I said, he kind of toes the line between like speculative and um literature and historical fiction, and so he kind of has his toes in several different
I'll
genres at
I'll
once.
throw this out there and say that A Brief History of Seven Killings is in the way that literary could be considered its own genre, which is domestic realism.
Hmm.
It's domestic realism.
Yeah.
It's talking about Jamaica in a certain time frame, but it's so character based that you're following these characters as they're going about their daily lives. Yes, it gets to, you know, a point, it has a plot to it, but if you're used to plot driven, genre fiction,
Hmm.
it's not going to hit.
Yeah.
It then again, it won the Booker Prize, I think. So, it hits
Mhm.
for some people, but yeah, it's domestic realism. It's boring as all get out.
Yeah, but I mean, different strokes for different folks, right? Different people like different books. But yeah, you're right. It did win the Booker Prize, so it was well liked by its audience. Um, all right. So I don't know. We have about 10 minutes left, and I'm not sure how many authors I have left on my list. So we're going to have to go kind of quick, and I apologize. Um, but the next author on my list is Leslie Neka Arima. She is a Nigerian author born in London. She moved to the US in her teens, and I believe she still lives in the US. Um, but she was named one of the National Book Foundation's 5 under 35 in 2017, and in 2019 she was a U.S. Artist Fellow in Writing. She writes literature, so this isn't so much speculative. Her writing isn't so much speculative, but she has won several awards for her work, including the Kirkus Prize in 2017, and a few other awards. Um, she mostly writes short stories. And her only published book is a collection of short stories that she's written. And of course, those short stories, before they were collected into this book, some of them had been published elsewhere in magazines and things like that. But What It Means When a Man Falls from the Sky is a fantastic collection of short stories. And I say that I don't I don't read a lot of just straight literature. I prefer to read genre fiction. Um, but I really enjoyed this collection of short stories. Highly recommend it if you're looking for some little bite-sized stories to read. They were very good. So, all right. Next is Tracy Dion. Um, I have not read any of her books, but they are on my TBR, and I've heard really good things about Legendborn. But she was raised in North Carolina. I think she started writing when she was like 5 or something. So she was writing for a really long, she's been writing for since a really long age. Oh my God, my sentence. She's been writing from a really young age. And she's worked in video game production and K through 12 education. And she mostly writes YA fantasy. And her books, or her book has won several awards. But she is also like Tomi Adeyemi. She is also very early in her writing career. So she only has 2 books that have been published so far, and they are in a series with each other. So Legendborn is her first book, and this is an as far as I have heard about it, it is a retelling or a reimagining of Arthurian legends with black characters, and I think in a more modern setting. And I've heard really good things about it. I can't tell you how many people have mentioned this book to me, just kind of offhand when we were talking about books. So this is definitely on my TBR because I've heard many, many good things about it. So if you're looking for like a YA fantasy retelling of Arthurian legends, definitely check this out because I've heard it's very, very good. And then Bloodmarked is the second book in the series, and I believe that came out last year or or the year before. I don't remember, but they're very recent books. Evan Winter is next on my list. He lives in Canada. He has worked as a filmmaker, creative director, bartender, so he's also had kind of an interesting career history. He writes epic fantasy. There's not a lot of information about him online, actually. His Wikipedia page is like this big. So that's about all there is to read about him online, unfortunately. But he has published 2 books, Rage of Dragons and Fires of Vengeance. These are epic fantasy. Rage of Dragons actually was first self-published and then was later picked up by forget which publishing house picked it up, but it was later picked up by a publishing house and has since been traditionally published. And then the sequel, Fires of Vengeance, has been traditionally published as well. I have heard so many good things about Rage of Dragons. It's on my TBR, and I just haven't gotten to it yet. It's a fairly new book, and so there's lag time between when things are published and when I get around to them. But I've heard really good things about Rage of Dragons. So if you're looking for epic fantasy, definitely check that out. I will be checking it out probably later this year, so I'll be able to tell you more after I read it. Colson Whitehead is next on the list. He was added by Sean, I believe. He graduated from Harvard University in 1991 and received a MacArthur Fellowship in 2002. He writes in several different genres, but he writes historical fiction, he writes crime fiction, he writes literature. So he kind of has his toes in many different genres as well. He's won several awards for his work. And these are some of his novels. Sean, I don't know if you have read any of these or not. Um,
He was not one that I added to
oh,
it,
okay.
but he is one that I have cited many times in talking about how literary fiction is domestic realism
Mhm.
until they decide they like somebody. And The Underground Railroad is absolutely alt history, and very much like a left-leaning alt history where for hundreds of years, alt history was very much a left-leaning thing or a looking at utopianism. And then in the past 30 to 50 years, it's been considered a right-wing thing.
Hmm.
To revise history in that direction. But
Yeah.
both P. Djeli Clark and Colston Whitehead create fantastic versions of history. P. Djeli is definitely still considered fully genre. Colson Whitehead, because of some of the things he's written, like Harlem Shuffle and Nickel Boys, which are domestic realism, is not considered such, and is fully accepted. Underground Railroad won a bunch of literary prizes, and is so fantastic. Like it is completely I what am I thinking? Genre fiction. And yet, like you could see it on a, university English syllabus for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I feel like literature, they like to do that. They kind of everything is genre until the literature people decide they like it, and then it's literature. Um, but yeah, if you're looking for historical fiction, alternate history, definitely check out some of his books because, like Sean said, he's won several awards for his work, including a Pulitzer, at least one Pulitzer Prize, if not two or three. So yeah, definitely check out his work for sure. Um, okay, I have two authors left because I remember I put these two guys at the bottom of the list because they work in
And these are
comics.
the ones that I put on your list.
These are the ones
Yeah.
that you added. They both work in comics. So Rob Guillory is our first comics writer and artist. He was born in Louisiana and studied computer animation at the University of Louisiana, but decided he would rather write and draw comics. And so that's what he does. He publishes through Image Comics, which Image Comics has a kind of a structure where the the properties, the series are owned by the creators, but they publish under the Image umbrella brand. So I think he has two series that are ongoing, but I think only one of them he's the actual like creator of, and so he's the writer and artist, and then the other one I think he's just the artist on. Um, but his comic series have won a couple of awards. So he has been awarded for his work in comics. Um, and these are his series. So the Farmhand, Chew, which I believe Chew is the one uh, that he draws, and I think Farmhand he writes and draws. I can't remember. I have to look it up again. And then Mosley is a third one that he works on as well. And I kind of want to check some of these out because I like comic books and
I'm
Mosley
like,
looks
Farmhand
really
is
cool.
right here. It's on my shelf. And yes, he writes it. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I kind of I saw this cover for Mosley and I was like, oh, that looks interesting. I kind of want to read that. So I might have to check that one out. But Sean, have you read any of these other ones?
No, just farmhand, but it's
Okay.
very good and it's a slow burn, kind of like you're, you go home and you realize your parents aren't exactly who you thought they were, and then it slowly is revealed that like not only is it bad, but it's like really bad.
Yeah.
And then another thing, and then another thing. So I really like how and it's well drawn. I love the illustration to it as well. That
Yeah.
really drives the story.
Yeah. Oh, cool. And then our last author on our list is Sanford Green. He is a comic artist, and he has worked for Marvel, Dark Horse, Image, and DC Comics. He's won three Eisner Awards and a Ringo Award. So his work, the comics that he has worked on, have been well received by their readership. And he's actually worked on a lot. When I was looking up comics that he has drawn for. He has actually worked on a lot of different series and ongoing series as well. But I believe this one, the 1000, I think he is the like artist and creator, so he writes and draws that one. But for I think all the other ones, he is an artist on these comics. I don't know, Sean, are you familiar with any of these?
Bitterroot is the one that I've read,
Mhm.
and it's amazing. It really is. And it's kind of like a 1920s. I'm not gonna put it as vampires or zombies, but like vampire zombies.
Mhm.
But similar to how Pete DeJelly Clark, Colson Whitehead use a lot of historical reference, and then I kind of push it to make it fantastic in order to I what am I thinking? In order to drive home the point. Bitterroot is very much about that. And it goes a lot into both how people are accepted in America. It's not an entirely black centric thing. It's a kind of like we're all affected by these things. I kind of thing, but it's a sprawling story. The South, New York City, Chinatown in New York City, all over the place, and all sorts of historical things. But it also plays on the idea of root work, which people know the word voodoo or hoodoo and where a lot of that stuff comes from. But root work is kind of the hidden way that African Americans practiced a very similar version of folk healing and mysticism at the same time, because really that's where witches come from. It's all mixed in together. It really is science and mysticism, put together.
Mhm.
But that's what the title is referencing, is root work.
Yeah. Cool. Very cool. So, anyway, that was our list, our celebration of some of the Tomeworks editors' favorite Black authors. Um, And I hope that you all enjoyed this kind of roundup. I know it was very fast, so if you are interested in any of the authors on our list, please, by all means, read their books, ask us more questions about them. We can share information, we can share book recommendations. And I know we're like right at time, but I did ask if people have book recommendations of their own from authors that were not on this list. Please share them in the chat. Take a moment, share them in the chat. We'd love to hear who your favorite Black authors are. Um, but thank you all for being here today on this Juneteenth holiday. And next week, like we said at the beginning, we have Ian is going to be here talking about problematic tropes. So we hope you'll join us for that next week as well. I see Sean added in the chat, N.E. Davenport, The Blood Trials. Yeah, I've heard of her.
She's got a second one out in the series now.
Yeah.
She's a Houstonian.
Hmm.
And it's very Hunger Games esque.
Yeah. Yeah. I know that name was ringing a bell, but I couldn't remember where I'd heard it before. Jean says, where do I find y'all at Comic Palooza? Oh, good question. So some of us will be on panels at Comic Palooza this weekend. Um, Shannon and I are on a panel tomorrow. Yeah, tomorrow's Friday. Tomorrow evening, from 5:30 to 6:30, it's a panel about tropes. So we'll be talking about that on Friday. I'm also on a panel on Saturday from 4:30 to 5:30 about aliens. Sean's on panels on Saturday. And he does say correctly, the literature room, like the main literature room for the literature track at Comic Palooza, is 350E, I believe. It's on the third floor. Um, and so, but yeah, we'll be hanging out around there. Um, when we're not on panels and stuff, we'll be, some of us will be hanging out, touring the vendor floor. We'll be on panels, so definitely check out the panel schedule for when all of our panels are, because I don't know when all of Sean's are. And Shannon has a few other ones that I don't know when they are either.
Yeah,
But definitely check
so
out
I
the
have
schedule.
10:30 a.m., noon, 1:30, 6:30, like I have panels all day
Yeah.
up there, but I am interviewing Christopher Rocchio at 1:30, I do believe, and it's an AMA, so bring your questions for a published author who writes very big, sprawling space operas.
Yeah. Yeah, he actually he has a busy day on Saturday because he has the AMA with you, then he has the panel with me, and then he has a book signing after that, and I believe he has at least one other panel that day. So he has a busy day on Saturday. But all right. Well, thank you guys so much for coming. I appreciate you all being here. And we hope to see you all next week for the problematic tropes writer's lunch. So thanks again.